The concept of hope is fundamentally flawed. It is a statistical anomaly, a fleeting chemical reaction in the brain triggered by the illusion of safety. Society treats it as a universal right, a warm blanket to throw over the cold, unfeeling machinery of reality. They package it, commercialize it, and plaster it onto billboards in the form of brightly colored spandex and blinding, pearly white smiles. But hope is not universal. It is an exclusive club. It is a VIP lounge reserved only for those fortunate enough to be born with the right genetic sequence. If you win the biological lottery, you are bathed in hope. You are told you can be anything. You are told you are the future. If you are born quirkless, you are the dirt beneath the foundation of their shining city. You exist only to provide contrast, to make the bright lights of the heroes look that much brighter. Izuku Midoriya did not know this at 14 years old. At 14, he was still infected with the disease. He believed in the illusion with every fiber of his fragile, battered body. He believed it when the sludge villain enveloped him beneath the overpass. The sensation of drowning in sentient, foul-tasting sewage was agonizing. The sludge forced its way down his throat, burning his windpipe, invading his lungs. The smell was abhorrent, like stagnant canal water and rotting meat. His vision swam, black dots dancing at the edges of his peripheral sight as oxygen deprivation set in. His hands, small and unscarred, clawed desperately at the fluid mass, but there was nothing to grasp. "I'm going to die," his panicked brain had screamed. "I'm dying here, and no one will ever know. I'll never be a hero." And then, the manhole cover burst open. "Fear not, kid!" A voice boomed, rich and resonant, echoing through the underpass with the force of a sonic boom. "I am here, Texas Smash." The wind pressure alone had obliterated the villain, scattering the sludge like rain. Izuku's lungs convulsed, coughing up the vile fluid, gasping for the sweet, life-giving air. As his vision cleared, he saw him. The symbol of peace. All Might. To Izuku, All Might was not merely a man. He was a deity. He was the living, breathing embodiment of hope. Towering, muscular, draped in primary colors that defied the gloom of the shadows. Just looking at him made the crushing weight of Izuku's daily life, the burns on his shoulders from Katsuki Bakugo, the mocking laughter of his classmates, the pitiful looks from his own mother, evaporate. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He fumbled for his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold the pen. All Might signed it with a flourish, a massive autograph spanning 2 pages. "Thank you? Thank you so much," Izuku had babbled, bowing repeatedly. "This is an heirloom. A family treasure." But All Might was already turning away, preparing to leap. "I must be off. I need to deliver this fellow to the authorities." "Wait." The word echoed in Izuku's mind. "Wait, I haven't asked you yet. I haven't asked you the only question that matters." Before conscious thought could stop him, Izuku lunged. He grabbed onto the fabric of All Might's trousers just as the number 1 hero bent his knees and launched into the stratosphere. The wind tore at Izuku's face, pulling his cheeks back, making his eyes water blindly. The ground fell away, buildings shrinking into toy blocks. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. He was flying with his god. "Hey, hey, hey! Release me! Your fanaticism is too much!" All Might shouted over the roaring wind, trying to pry the boy off. "If I let go now, I'll die!" Izuku screamed back, his fingers locked in a death grip. Realization dawned on the hero, and with a heavy sigh, he steered them toward a nearby rooftop. They landed with a heavy thud, Izuku collapsing onto the green-painted concrete, his legs entirely turned to jelly. He was panting, his heart trying to break out of his ribcage, but he forced himself up. This was his chance. His only chance. "Good grief," All Might grumbled, patting his pockets. "If you talk to the people downstairs, they'll get you down. I really am out of time." "Wait!" Izuku cried out, reaching a hand forward. "Just 1 second. I have to know." All Might paused, his massive back turned to the scrawny boy. "No! I will not wait." Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. All the pain, all the rejection, all the years of desperately pretending that his life had value culminated in this single breath. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? Izuku shouted, the words tearing from his throat. Can even someone without a quirk be like you? Silence fell over the rooftop. Only the distant, muffled sounds of the city below, horns honking, sirens wailing, the low hum of millions of people living their lives, filled the void. Izuku kept his eyes squeezed shut, bracing himself. He began to ramble, a defense mechanism he'd honed over a decade of bullying. Because people think I don't have a chance. And maybe they're right. But I think saving people is the most amazing thing in the world. The way you save people with that fearless smile. I want to be the greatest hero, just like you. He opened his eyes, a desperate, tearful smile on his face. But all might was gone. In his place stood a skeletal, emaciated man in baggy clothes. His eyes were sunken, dark shadows masking his face. Blood trickled from his mouth. Izuku stared, his brain completely stalling. What? An imposter? A fake? You're so skinny. The man wiped the blood from his chin. I am All Might, he sighed, his voice raspy and hollow, entirely lacking the booming confidence from minutes prior. What followed was an explanation that tore away the curtain of Izuku's reality. All Might lifted his shirt, revealing a horrific, purple-mottled scar that looked like the epicenter of an explosion radiating from his chest. He explained his limits. He explained the surgeries, the destruction of his respiratory system, the missing stomach. He explained that the symbol of peace was nothing but a brave face put on to hide the fear. Pros are always risking their lives, All Might said, his sunken blue eyes locking onto Izuku with a chilling, cold realism. Some villains simply can't be beaten without powers. Izuku felt a cold chill start at the base of his spine and slowly creep upward. The air on the roof suddenly felt suffocating, thinner than it had been a moment ago. So, no, All Might delivered the final, fatal blow. I cannot honestly say you can be a hero without a quirk. The world stopped. There was no dramatic thunderclap. No sudden rush of wind. Just a quiet, absolute shattering inside Izuku Midoriya's chest. The sound of a grand, beautiful glass cathedral collapsing into powder. It's not bad to dream, All Might added, turning away, walking toward the rooftop door. But you also have to consider what's realistic, young man. If you want to help people, become a police officer. They get mocked for receiving villains at the end of the line, but it's a fine profession. The door opened. The door closed. Izuku was alone. He stood there for a long, long time. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in vibrant, bleeding hues of orange, pink, and bruised purple. The colors seemed garish. Disgusting. Too bright. Consider what's realistic. The words echoed in his skull. They bounced around, growing louder, distorted, like a corrupted audio file. Consider what's realistic. For 14 years, Izuku had survived off the fumes of hope. He had taken every beating from Kaken, every mocking laugh from his teachers, every sorrowful, tear-soaked apology from his mother, and locked them away in a box in his mind. He had convinced himself that it was a trial. A hurdle he had to overcome to achieve greatness. He believed that the universe was fundamentally just, and that pure willpower could bridge the gap between human and superhuman. But the god of his world had just looked him in the eye and told him the truth. You are defective. You are nothing. Izuku looked down at his trembling hands. The hands of a quirkless nobody. They were small. Weak. Useless. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over him. The panic, the deep, agonizing sorrow that usually accompanied his daily humiliations, vanished. It didn't fade. It was cleanly excised, as if a surgeon had reached into his brain and snipped the nerve ending connected to grief. In its place came a chilling, absolute clarity. He walked to the edge of the roof and looked down at the streets below. The people looked like ants, mindless, scrambling insects, moving along predetermined paths, dictated by the invisible forces of their genetic code. A stage play, Izuku whispered. His voice didn't sound like his own. It lacked the characteristic tremble, the inherent apology that laced every syllable he usually spoke. It was flat. Cold. Hero society wasn't a noble pursuit of justice. It was an industry. It was a reality television show with collateral damage. The heroes were just actors with flashy special effects, fighting villains who were often just victims of the same genetic lottery, mutated into outcasts by society's rigid standards. And the currency that fueled this entire, sickening masquerade? Hope. Hope is a lie, Izuku breathed into the evening air. He turned away from the ledge and walked toward the stairs. His footsteps echoed in the stairwell. With every step downward, the boy who wanted to save people with a smile died a little more. By the time he reached the ground floor, Izuku Midoriya, the crybaby, the Deku, the hopeful fanatic, was gone. What remained was a vessel, rapidly filling with something dark, dense, and infinitely more powerful. As Izuku walked aimlessly through the streets, the sounds of the city seemed different. He was no longer listening to the hum of life. He was hearing the grinding gears of a broken machine. Then he heard it. Boom! An explosion rocked the air, followed by a plume of black smoke rising above the skyline a few blocks away. The smell of burning asphalt and sulfur drifted toward him. Under normal circumstances, Izuku would have sprinted toward the commotion, his notebook in hand, eager to see which pro-heroes were on the scene. Today, his legs carried him at a measured, detached pace. He wasn't walking toward a hero fight. He was walking toward a crime scene. He was walking toward data. He reached the edge of the crowd. A shopping district was in ruins. Fires raged out of control, licking the sides of shattered storefronts. Sirens wailed, and the heat was oppressive. Izuku slipped through the throngs of terrified, whispering civilians, moving to the front of the police barricade. His green eyes, now devoid of their usual star-struck shimmer, coldly assessed the situation. It was the sludge villain, the very same one. All Might must have dropped the bottle when Izuku grabbed his leg. Ah, Izuku thought, a microscopic, hollow smile touching the corner of his lips. The infallible god made a mistake because of a bug like me. How beautifully pathetic. But the villain wasn't alone. He had taken a hostage. Trapped within the suffocating, foul-smelling mass of the villain was a boy with ash-blonde hair. Katsuki Bakugo. His childhood friend. His tormentor. His abuser. Bakugo was thrashing wildly, his palms igniting with furious, desperate explosions. But the fire only fueled the chaos, igniting the surrounding buildings and keeping the heroes at bay. The sludge was forcing its way into Bakugo's mouth, his eyes wide with a terror Izuku had never seen before. The great, invincible Katsuki Bakugo, reduced to a suffocating, helpless animal. Izuku's eyes flicked to the pro-heroes on the scene. Death Arms was standing back, holding his massive arms up as if shielding his face from the heat. "It's no good," he yelled. "I can't get near him with these fires. There's no grip on that sludge." Kamui Woods was perched on a lamppost, his wooden limbs useless. "I'm made of wood. Fire is my ultimate weakness. I can't intervene without a clear path." Empty Lady, towering over the street, was rubbing her chin in frustration. "I need at least 2 lanes to maneuver. I can't fit in here without crushing civilians or the buildings." Backdraft, the water hero, was entirely focused on the fires, ignoring the dying boy in the center of the street. "I'm busy with the flames. Someone else has to grab the kid." Izuku stared. His mind, the brilliant, hyper-analytical engine he had used to worship these people, engaged at blinding speed. Death Arms possesses superhuman strength. If he threw debris at the villain's eyes, the only solid, vulnerable part of its anatomy, he could distract it long enough to rip Bakugo free. But he won't, because he's afraid of getting burned, afraid of a liability lawsuit if he misses. Kamui Woods could use his lacquered chain prison as a bridge over the flames, sacrificing the outer layer of his bark to snatch the hostage. It would hurt, but he would heal. But he won't, because he doesn't want to damage his aesthetic, his marketability. Empty Lady could shrink, run in, and enlarge her arm at the exact moment of impact to disrupt the sludge. But she won't, because she's a newly debuted hero entirely reliant on grand spectacle, and doesn't know how to do precision rescue work. They aren't helpless, Izuku realized, the absolute absurdity of the scene washing over him. They are making excuses. They are waiting for someone with a better quirk so they don't have to risk themselves. They are waiting for a more convenient heroism. Izuku looked back at Bakugo. Bakugo's red eyes locked onto Izuku in the crowd. Through the swirling smoke and the terror, a silent message passed between them. It was a plea. A desperate, agonizing cry for help. For a fraction of a second, the old Izuku flared to life. His muscles twitched. His foot shifted forward. The instinct to save, to run into danger blindly, surged in his blood. If I run in, I could throw my backpack, Izuku thought. I could hit the eye. I could claw at the sludge. I could give him a breath of air. But then, the voice of the god echoed in his mind. Consider what's realistic. Izuku stopped. His foot lowered back to the pavement. Why should he? Why should a quirkless nobody, the bottom of the societal barrel, risk his life to save a boy who had told him to take a swan dive off the roof just that morning? Why should he do the job of the fully licensed, highly paid adults standing 10 feet away? If this society worshipped quirks so much, let the quirks sort it out. Izuku stood perfectly still. He folded his arms. His face went entirely blank, a terrifying mask of apathy. He watched. He analyzed. Help him! A civilian screamed. The kid is drowning. We have to wait for someone with the right quirk. Death Arms yelled back, gritting his teeth. Wait, Izuku thought. Yes. Wait. Let the system play out to its logical conclusion. The seconds ticked by. They felt like hours. Bakugo's explosions began to weaken. The sharp, rapid-fire cracks turned into muffled, pathetic pops. His thrashing slowed. The whites of his eyes rolled back as the oxygen deprivation reached critical levels. The villain laughed, a gurgling, triumphant sound. Yes. Just a little more. I've almost got his body. What a powerful quirk. The sludge villain crowed. Bakugo's left arm, previously firing off explosions, suddenly jerked unnaturally. A sickening pop echoed over the roar of the flames, masked to most, but Izuku's hyper-focused senses caught it. The villain was forcing the boy's limbs into impossible angles to fully possess the muscular structure. Where is All Might? Someone cried in the crowd. Izuku didn't look around. He knew All Might was out of time. The pathetic, bleeding skeleton was probably hiding in an alley nearby, watching his failure. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Bakugo went entirely limp. His hands stopped moving. The sludge forced itself completely down his throat. He's dead, Izuku thought, his heartbeat steady, slow. Or his brain is starved of oxygen. Permanent neurological damage. Suddenly, the crowd erupted. A massive blur of speed and power tore through the smoke. I am pathetic. All Might, in his muscle form, blood literally bursting from his mouth, ripped through the air. He didn't even use a named smash. He simply grabbed Bakugo by the collar and swung his other arm with the force of a hurricane. The sheer wind pressure generated by the punch altered the weather, pulling the clouds together in the sky above and creating an updraft that blew out the fires in an instant. The sludge villain exploded into 1,000 scattered droplets, splattering against the walls of the ruined street. The crowd was silent for a moment, stunned by the sheer, godlike display of power. And then, it started raining. The cheers that followed were deafening. All Might! It's All Might! He changed the weather. Izuku watched as All Might stood over Bakugo's limp body, posing for the cameras, his trademark smile plastered onto his bleeding face. He saw the pro-heroes rushing in now, checking on the unconscious boy, securing the sludge. Izuku didn't stay to hear the reporters. He didn't stay to see if Bakugo breathed again. He had seen everything he needed to see. He turned his back on the symbol of peace and walked away, into the rain. The television in the Midoriya apartment was murmuring quietly. Miraculous rescue by All Might in Tatooine shopping district, the newscaster's polished voice reported. However, tragedy strikes as the hostage, middle school student Katsuki Bakugo, suffered severe, life-altering injuries during the prolonged attack. Medical experts report catastrophic damage to his vocal cords from the ingested sludge, and severe nerve damage to his forearms due to hyperextension and inward explosive force. Doctors are unsure if he will ever regain full motor function, effectively ending any hopes of a hero career. Izuku sat at his desk in his dark bedroom. The only light came from his desk lamp, casting long, sharp shadows across the walls. The walls, they were covered in him. All Might. Posters, action figures, limited edition prints, bedsheets, alarm clocks. Hundreds of grinning, muscular faces staring down at him. For over a decade, this room had been a sanctuary. A church dedicated to the religion of hope. Now, it felt like a tomb. It felt like a monument to a lie. Izuku reached into his yellow backpack. It was scorched from the fires at the shopping district. He pulled out his notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. The edges were charred, and the cover was damp from the rain. He opened it to the middle. The massive, sprawling signature of All Might stared back at him. Izuku stared at the signature. He didn't feel angry. He didn't feel sad. He felt liberated. As if a massive, suffocating weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The chains of expectation, the desperate need to fit into a society that fundamentally rejected him, were gone. He understood the truth now. Society was sick. It was a hierarchy built on a foundation of genetic superiority, masked as morality. The strong were heralded as heroes, regardless of their actual character. Like Katsuki, a violent abuser groomed for greatness simply because he sweat nitroglycerin. The weak were discarded, trampled, or turned into villains because society offered them no other path. And hope was the opiate that kept the masses blind to this cruelty. Hope was the belief that All Might would always swoop in at the last second. But he didn't, Izuku thought, his mind replaying the image of Bakugo's limp, broken body. He was late. And because he was late, the golden child of Aldera Junior High is broken forever. The heroes did nothing. The system failed. If hope was the disease, what was the cure? Izuku slowly picked up a lighter from his desk drawer, one he kept to melt the ends of frayed shoelaces. He flicked the metal wheel. A small, orange flame danced in the dark room. He held the flame to the edge of the notebook. The paper caught easily, the fire eating away at All Might's signature, curling the pages, turning his meticulous notes on hero quirks into black, flaking ash. Izuku watched it burn until the heat licked his fingertips. He dropped the flaming book into a metal wastebasket, watching as the fire illuminated the smiling faces of the posters around him. Hope is unequal, Izuku murmured to the empty room. It relies on luck. On genetics. On the whims of people who have power. He opened his desk drawer again and pulled out a fresh, unlined notebook. It was a stark, matte black. No hero insignia. No bright colors. He clicked his pen, but despair. Izuku's pen hovered over the first page. Despair is universal. Despair doesn't care if you have a quirk or not. It doesn't care if you are rich, poor, weak, or strong. When faced with absolute, undeniable tragedy, everyone breaks the exact same way. In despair, there was true equality. In despair, the playing field was finally level. Izuku began to write. He didn't write about how to save people. He didn't write about the strengths of heroes. He wrote about their flaws. He started with empty lady. Vanity. Desire for media attention. Easily distracted by cameras. Weakness. Hostage situations in enclosed spaces. Collateral damage liability. He moved to Kamui Woods. Insecurity about his rank. Rigid adherence to honorable combat. Weakness, fire, yes, but also moral ambiguity. Force him to choose between the law and a life, and he will hesitate. He wrote about death arms. Fear of failure masked by bravado. Weakness, public perception. If the crowd turns against him, his confidence shatters. He wrote for hours. His handwriting, usually a frantic, excited scrawl, was now immaculate, precise, and terrifyingly cold. He broke down the psychology of every hero he had witnessed that day. He didn't just analyze their physical quirks. He analyzed their mental breaking points. How much pressure would it take to make a hero abandon a civilian? How much fear would it take to make them turn on each other? When he finally stopped, his hand was cramped, but his mind had never felt clearer. He closed the black notebook. On the cover, in precise white ink, he wrote, Despair Analysis for the Future, Volume 1. Izuku stood up from his desk. The fire in the wastebasket had died down to glowing red embers. He walked over to the full-length mirror attached to his closet door. He looked at his reflection. He saw a boy with messy green hair, a face dotted with freckles, and dark bags under his eyes. He saw the scars on his collarbone from Katsuki's explosions. He saw the weak, quirkless Deku. But as he looked deeper, the reflection seemed to shift. The green eyes, once wide and full of naive wonder, were now completely vacant. They were dark voids, devoid of light, reflecting nothing but the quiet madness blossoming in his mind. Izuku reached up and gripped his own face. His fingers dug into his cheeks. He forced the corners of his mouth upward. It was a smile, but it was entirely devoid of joy. It was too wide, stretching his skin taut. It was a manic, fractured expression, a grotesque parody of the fearless grin All Might wore. It was a smile that promised absolute ruin. It was the expression of a boy who had looked into the abyss, and instead of blinking, had decided to invite the abyss in for tea. A low chuckle escaped his lips. It started quietly, a dry rattling in his throat, before bubbling up into a quiet, hysterical laugh. The laughter bounced off the walls of the room, mingling with the mocking smiles of the All Might merchandise surrounding him. "Let's see it," Izuku whispered to his reflection, his terrifying grin stretching wider. "Let's see how strong your hope really is when it's drowning in the dark." He would tear it all down. Not with physical strength, not with a quirk, but with his mind. He would expose the heroes, dismantle the system, and plunge society into a beautiful, equalizing tragedy. He wouldn't be a villain. Villains had goals. Villains wanted money, or power, or societal reform. Izuku didn't want any of that. He just wanted to watch the illusion of hope burn, and revel in the pure, unadulterated despair that would rise from its ashes. The ultimate despair was born. And he was going to destroy the world. The bedroom that once served as a shrine to the symbol of peace was dead. In its place, an entirely different kind of sanctuary had been constructed. The posters of All Might, with their primary colors and blinding smiles, had been torn down, leaving pale, rectangular ghosts on the fading wallpaper. The action figures had been melted down in the kitchen oven. Izuku had watched the plastic bubble and deform with a serene, terrifying stillness, reducing the invincible heroes to unrecognizable lumps of toxic slag. Now, the room was bathed in the clinical, harsh blue light of 6 computer monitors. Izuku Midoriya sat in the center of this electronic web, his fingers dancing across a heavily modified mechanical keyboard. The rhythmic clack-clack-clack was the only sound in the suffocating silence of the apartment. Getting the hardware had been surprisingly simple. Hero Society was a wasteful machine. At Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a dumping ground for illegal trash that the heroes ignored because there was no glory in cleaning it, Izuku had found everything he needed. Discarded motherboards, cracked servers from bankrupt support companies, cooling fans, and miles of copper wiring. While other kids his age were practicing their quirks or studying for high school, Izuku spent his nights hauling scrap metal and electronics back to his room. He didn't have a quirk to build his body, so he built a god instead. He networked the scavenged servers, creating an encrypted, decentralized processing rig that spanned the entirety of his small closet and under his bed. He called his system the Panopticon. Izuku took a sip of lukewarm black coffee. His green eyes, previously wide and expressive, were now perpetually narrowed, reflecting the scrolling lines of code and data packets. Over the past 3 months, his hyper-analytical mind, once used to excitedly scribble notes about Kamui Wood's reach or Backdraft's water pressure, had been unleashed onto the dark web. When you stop looking at the world through the lens of hope, you see the cracks in the foundation everywhere. "Let's see what the Commission is hiding today," Izuku whispered, his voice a flat, emotionless drone. He was currently routing his IP address through 13 different proxy servers across the globe, bouncing his signal from an internet cafe in Hosu, to a satellite over South Africa, to a server farm in Russia, before finally knocking on the back door of the Hero Public Safety Commission's database. It was a vulnerability he had found weeks ago. The HPSC used a custom encryption algorithm for their top-secret files, assuming that anyone smart enough to hack them would be a known, registered intelligence quirk user who was already on their payroll. They never accounted for a 14-year-old quirkless boy who had spent his entire life obsessively analyzing patterns. Click. The firewall fell. Izuku's screen flooded with classified documents. He didn't blink. He absorbed the information like a sponge. File Operation Tartarus Transfer. Cover-ups of villain deaths in custody. File Lady Nagant. Preemptive assassination orders against rogue heroes. File Hawks Project. Grooming a child into a weaponized double agent. Izuku smiled. It was the same wide, empty smile he had worn the day he burned his notebooks. It didn't reach his eyes. Hypocrites, he murmured. They build their shining utopia on a mountain of corpses, and then smile for the cameras. They dictate who is allowed to live, who is allowed to be a hero, and who must be discarded in the dark. He downloaded the files, encrypting them in a hidden partition on his hard drive. This was his ammunition. Information was a quirk of its own, far more devastating than fire or ice. You couldn't punch a leaked document. You couldn't put a barricade around the truth. But information alone wasn't enough to induce the kind of despair Izuku envisioned. To tear down the system, he needed physical infrastructure. He needed an army. He needed a symbol of his own. Izuku minimized the HPSC files and pulled up his next target, Deadnerat, a leading lifestyle support item manufacturer. On the surface, they were a legitimate, highly profitable company that made gear for citizens with minor mutation quirks. But Izuku's analysis of their supply chains, combined with anonymous chatter on the dark web, revealed massive discrepancies. Thousands of tons of high-grade, weaponized alloys were disappearing from their manifests. Someone inside Deadnerat was building an army. Izuku had dug deeper. He cross-referenced the CEO, Rikiya Yatsubashi, with historical databases. He noted Yatsubashi's facial structure, his rhetoric in public interviews, and his suspicious connection to an old, banned autobiography titled Meta-Liberation War. Redestro, Izuku breathed, leaning back in his chair. The Meta-Liberation Army. You're preparing for a war. How quaint. You want a society where quirk usage is completely unrestricted. A world governed by pure Darwinism. Izuku found the ideology utterly pathetic. It was just another hierarchy. Instead of heroes ruling the weak, the strong quirks would rule the weak quirks. The quirkless would still be crushed beneath the heel of the genetic elite. It was boring. It lacked the beautiful equality of absolute despair, but Deadnerat had resources. Factories. Engineers. Izuku needed those. He opened a highly secure, encrypted messaging channel, directing it straight to the personal, offline terminal in Rikiya Yatsubashi's private penthouse, a connection he had spent 2 weeks mapping. Izuku typed a message. Rikiya Yatsubashi was enjoying a glass of fine bourbon in his high-rise office when his private, completely disconnected terminal chimed. The CEO froze. He slowly set down his glass, a dark stain of stress spreading across his forehead. That terminal was hardwired. It wasn't connected to the internet. The only way it could receive a message was if someone had compromised the very physical cabling beneath the Deadnerat building. He walked to the screen. Sender, Mastermind. Good evening, Grand Commander of the Meta-Liberation Army. Or do you prefer Redestro? I find the latter a bit melodramatic, but to each their own. Yatsubashi's breath caught in his throat. His quirk, stress, flared instantly, his hand growing massive and dark as pure panic set in. The secret of the MLA, cultivated over generations, exposed in a single text, he typed back, his massive fingers barely fitting on the keys. Yatsubashi, who are you? What is this? If this is a prank, you have signed your death warrant. Mastermind, I am not a hero. I am not the police. I am simply a spectator who has noticed your grand play. I have attached a file. It contains the names, addresses, and quirk registries of 15,000 embedded Liberation Army members, along with the offshore accounts funding your little revolution. It is currently set to an automated dead man's switch. If I do not reset it every 24 hours, the file will be simultaneously emailed to the HPSC, the National Police Agency, and every major news outlet in Japan. Yatsubashi felt a cold sweat break out over his body. He opened the attached file. It was all there. Trumpet's political ties. Curious media manipulation. Everything. Yatsubashi, what do you want? Money? Power? Name your price. Mastermind, money is a fiction. I require your manufacturing capabilities. Attached is a blueprint. It is a highly advanced, semi-autonomous robotic unit. I want 100 of them built and delivered to a warehouse in Kamino Ward by the end of the month. Fully armed. Completely untraceable. You will use your best engineers, but you will compartmentalize the production so no single worker knows what they are building. Yatsubashi opened the second attachment. His eyes widened. It was a schematic for an animatronic mascot. A rabbit. But the design was deeply unsettling. The left half was a soft, innocent green, resembling a children's cartoon character with a sweet, dotted eye. The right half was a jagged, midnight black, with a wicked, jagged grin and a glowing, blood-red mechanical eye. The specifications were terrifying. Hidden ballistic compartments in the mouth. Taser grips in the paws. A self-destruct mechanism packing enough C4 to level a city block. It was designed to move with unsettling speed, mimicking human biometrics. Yatsubashi, a toy? You are blackmailing the most powerful underground army in Japan to build you killer toys? Mastermind, symbols are important, Yatsubashi. You have your Destro statues. I have my rabbit. I call him Mono Rabbit. He is going to be the face of the new world. Produce them perfectly, and your secret remains safe. Fail, or attempt to track this signal, and the Meta-Liberation Army ends before it even begins. Do we have a deal? Yatsubashi stared at the grinning, split-faced rabbit on his screen. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Commander of the MLA felt entirely outmaneuvered. He felt a deep, creeping dread. Yatsubashi, we have a deal. In his dark bedroom, miles away, Izuku smiled. He closed the connection. Perfect, Izuku whispered. The pieces were falling into place. The physical infrastructure was secured. Now, he needed to investigate the competition. The criminal underworld of Japan was chaotic, decentralized, and largely comprised of petty thugs and disorganized Yakuza remnants. However, over the past few weeks, Izuku had noticed a subtle shift in the data. Certain high-profile crimes were being covered up not by the heroes, but by someone else. Villains with powerful quirks were disappearing before they could be arrested. There was a phantom current moving beneath the surface of society, drawing the worst of the worst toward a single, unseen singularity. Izuku tracked the digital footprint of a well-known underground broker named Jiren. Jiren was careful, but he was old school. He still used burner phones. By analyzing the triangulation of Jiren's cell tower pings, Izuku isolated a small, run-down bar in Kamino Ward. Izuku hacked the city traffic cameras outside the bar. He watched the feed for 3 days. No customers went in or out. But the thermal imaging showed distinct heat signatures inside. He dug deeper, hacking the municipal blueprints. The bar had a massive underground facility beneath it, drawing an absurd amount of electricity from the city grid, enough to power life support systems and advanced Noma incubation tanks. Someone very powerful is hiding here, Izuku deduced. He didn't just want to know who they were. He wanted them to know who he was. Izuku pulled up a voice modulation program on his computer. He tweaked the settings until his voice lost all its youthful pitch, transforming into a deep, distorted, metallic hum. It sounded like a voice from a nightmare, entirely devoid of humanity. He found the landline number for the bar. He dialed. Ring. Ring. Inside the dusty, dimly lit bar in Kamino Ward, Tamura Shigaraki paused. He was scratching his neck, his red eyes glaring at a game over screen on his handheld console. Kurojairi, Shigaraki rasped. Why is the phone ringing? Nobody has this number. Behind the bar, the misty, purple entity composed of warp gates stopped polishing a glass. I do not know, Tamura Shigaraki. Perhaps a wrong number. Answer it, Shigaraki commanded, his scratching intensifying. Kurojairi picked up the receiver. Hello? This is a private establishment. Put the man-child on the phone, a distorted, metallic voice echoed from the receiver. Kurojairi's yellow eyes narrowed. May I ask who is calling? You are a glorified taxi service. I did not ask to speak to the transport. Put Tamura Shigaraki on the line. Kurojairi hesitated, then silently handed the phone to Shigaraki. Shigaraki grabbed it, one finger carefully raised to avoid decaying the plastic. Who the hell is this? Shigaraki hissed. You've got some nerve. I'll turn you to dust. Fascinating, Izuku's modulated voice replied. Your immediate response to an unknown variable is violent bluster. It highlights a severe lack of emotional regulation. You speak of destroying things, yet you hide in a dusty bar like a rat in the walls. You are a pawn playing at being a king. Shigaraki slammed his fist onto the bar, decaying a small chunk of the wood. "I'll kill you!" Kurojiri, trace this call. "He can't," Izuku stated simply. "I am bouncing off a satellite currently orbiting over the Pacific." "But let us skip the pleasantries, Shigaraki. You hate All Might. You want to destroy the symbol of peace, but you lack the vision. You think you can just throw some bioengineered freak, what are you calling them, Nomu, at him and win. You don't understand that killing a symbol physically only makes them a martyr." Shigaraki froze. The scratching stopped. How do you know about the Nomu?" "I know everything. I know your sensei is keeping you on a leash. I know you are impatient. But most importantly, I know you are going to fail if you try to attack Yui High School blindly." "Who are you?" Shigaraki screamed, his voice cracking. Before Izuku could respond, a dark, heavy static filled the line. The sound of Shigaraki's breathing vanished, replaced by the mechanical whirring of a life support machine. "Tamura, put the phone on speaker," a new voice said. It was a voice that commanded absolute obedience. It was cultured, smooth, but laced with a terrifying, ancient malice. Even miles away, sitting safely in his room, Izuku felt a chill run down his spine. This is him, Izuku realized. The master. "Who am I speaking with?" the deep voice asked. Izuku leaned closer to his microphone. "The man who has deduced your existence from the shadows. 5 years ago, a massive seismic anomaly occurred in Kamino Ward, officially registered as a minor earthquake. Simultaneously, All Might vanished from the public eye for 3 months, undergoing multiple undocumented surgeries at a private HPSC hospital. Violent crime in the underground dropped by 43% for 2 years following this event. The conclusion is simple. A god-tier villain clashed with All Might. You broke his body. He broke yours." Silence stretched over the line. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. "You are remarkably observant," the ancient villain finally said, a hint of genuine amusement in his tone. "Very few put those pieces together. Those who do are usually eliminated. You have my attention. What do you call yourself?" "You may call me the Mastermind." "Mastermind. A bold title. Tell me, Mastermind, why are you calling my sanctuary? Are you seeking employment? Do you wish to join the League of Villains?" "Join?" Izuku laughed, the distorted sound echoing harshly. "I don't serve. I called to offer a mutually beneficial non-aggression pact. And an education." "An education?" The villain chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "I have lived for over a century. I have ruled an empire. What could you possibly teach me?" "I can teach you how to break them properly," Izuku replied smoothly. "You want to steal quirks. You want to rule through fear. But fear is temporary. Fear can be overcome by hope. If you want to truly destroy Hero Society, you must introduce them to absolute despair. You must make them destroy themselves." Izuku brought up his files. "I will not interfere with your league. In fact, I will occasionally feed you data. Vulnerabilities in hero patrols. UA security schedules. In exchange, you will stay out of my way. And when the time comes, you will let me orchestrate the grand finale." "You speak with the confidence of a god, Mastermind. But you are hiding behind a screen. Why should I not simply order my associates to tear this city apart until I find you?" Izuku grinned. He pressed a key. "Because, all for one," Izuku said, using the name he had deciphered from deep web urban legends, "if my heart stops beating, or if my server goes offline, a highly encrypted packet will be sent to the #1 hero, detailing the exact GPS coordinates of your life support chair." The silence on the line was absolute. For the first time in perhaps 50 years, All for One was entirely caught off guard. "I see," All for One finally said, his voice dropping an octave. "A dead man's switch. You play a dangerous game, Mastermind. I play to win. Do we have an understanding?" A low, dark chuckle echoed from the machine. "We have an understanding. I look forward to watching your despair unfold. Do try to keep Tamura entertained." Click. The line went dead. Izuku exhaled slowly, letting his heart rate return to normal. He had just played a game of chess with the devil, and he had secured a stalemate. The League of Villains would be his perfect proxy. They would act as the loud, destructive distraction, drawing the eyes of the heroes, while Izuku planted the seeds of anarchy directly beneath their feet. 10 months passed. In the canon timeline, these 10 months would have been spent hauling trash on Dagoba Beach, crying, sweating, and inheriting the power of the gods from All Might. In this timeline, Izuku spent 10 months perfecting his art. He didn't lift a single tire. His physical body remained thin, unremarkable, and unassuming. He perfected his Deku persona. He went to Aldera Junior High, kept his head down, flinched when Bakugo, who had returned to school weeks later, heavily bandaged, his arms fitted with bulky, compression support gear, his voice reduced to a raspy snarl, glared at him. Izuku played the victim perfectly. He let Bakugo push him around, let the teachers ignore him. Every insult, every shove, only fueled the dark amusement festering in his chest. They have no idea, he thought constantly. They have no idea that they are already dead. They just haven't stopped breathing yet. Under the cover of night, his empire grew. The warehouse in Kamino Ward slowly filled with 100 perfectly constructed mono-rabbits, courtesy of the terrified CEO of Dead Narat. Izuku had hijacked a defunct satellite, creating his own unjammable broadcasting network. And then, it was time for the UA entrance exam. Izuku didn't apply for the hero course. He had no quirk, and despite his robotic arsenal, he had no intention of fighting in the dirt like a brute. He applied for the General Studies department. The morning of the exam, the sun was shining brightly over the massive, H-shaped UA building. Cherry blossoms drifted through the air. Hopeful teenagers marched through the gates, their eyes wide with dreams of heroism. Izuku walked among them, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He wore a plain black middle school uniform. He spotted a girl with a round face and permanent blush, Achiko Uraraka, looking nervously at the gates. He saw a tall, stiff-moving boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, lecturing someone about posture. And he saw Bakugo, his posture hunched, glaring at the building as if trying to set it on fire with his mind, his forearms wrapped in rigid, metallic braces to compensate for his ruined nerves. Izuku felt a surge of cold delight. Look at them. The future of society. So fragile. He walked past the auditorium where President Mike was explaining the practical exam. He didn't need to hear it. He proceeded directly to the testing center for the written examination. The General Studies written test was notoriously difficult, designed to weed out those who couldn't make it into the hero course but still wanted the prestige of UA. For Izuku, it was painfully simple. He finished the mathematics, science, and history sections in half the allotted time. His mind processed the information with mechanical efficiency, but Izuku was careful. If he scored a perfect 100%, he would draw too much attention. He would be flagged as a genius, monitored by Principal Nizu. He didn't want the rat looking at him, so Izuku intentionally answered several complex questions incorrectly. He calculated his final score to be exactly 86%, high enough to be accepted, but low enough to remain entirely unexceptional. However, on the final section, an essay question regarding the role of heroes in modern society, Izuku allowed himself a small indulgence. He wrote a flawlessly structured, seemingly innocent essay. But hidden within the subtext, disguised behind academic language, was a scathing, undeniable critique of the inherent inequality of the quirk system. He subtly argued that relying on individuals for structural societal safety was a mathematical fallacy. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Whoever read it would feel a deep, unsettling sense of dread, but they wouldn't be able to articulate why. Izuku placed his pencil down. He looked out the window. In the distance, he could hear the muffled explosions of the practical exam. The hero hopefuls were destroying giant robots, fighting for scraps of glory. Let them break their toys, Izuku thought, his reflection in the window smiling that terrifying, jagged smile. I'll break their minds. 2 weeks later, the mail arrived. Izuku sat at his desk, his computer monitors dark for once. On his desk sat a small, metallic disc. He pressed the button. A holographic projection of President Mike sprang to life. Yeah. What's up, listener? The voice hero shouted. Izuku Midoriya. You applied for the General Studies department. And let me tell you, your written exam was solid. You scored an 86%, placing you squarely in the upper percentile of applicants. But what really caught the judge's eyes was your essay. Principal Niza himself read it, and said it was a remarkably pragmatic, if somewhat cynical, view of our society. Izuku rested his chin on his hands, his eyes dead. So, with no practical exam required for Gen Ed, it is my honor to tell you. You passed. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram fizzled out. Izuku sat in the silence of his room. He didn't cry tears of joy. He didn't clench his fist in triumph. He simply turned his chair around. Sitting in the corner of his room, partially obscured by the shadows, was the prototype, the mono rabbit. It was exactly as he had designed it. 3 feet tall. The left side was covered in soft, plush green fabric, complete with a floppy ear and a cute, stitched smile. The right side was exposed, jagged black metal, ending in a razor-sharp mechanical ear. Its right eye was a glowing red optic sensor, currently whirring as it locked onto Izuku. The jagged metal teeth formed a permanent, sadistic grin. Boot up, mono rabbit, Izuku commanded softly. The mechanical rabbit twitched. Its head snapped toward Izuku with terrifying speed. Puh! A high-pitched, manic voice erupted from the rabbit's internal speakers. Izuku had coded the voice himself. It was cheerful, grating, and utterly insane. Good morning, Mastermind. Are we ready to spread some despair today? Izuku stood up. He walked over to the mono rabbit, and gently patted its soft, green half. Soon, Izuku whispered. He looked toward his window, looking out over the sprawling metropolis of Muzurifu. I've gained access to the castle. Now we observe. We find their weaknesses. We find out who they love, what they fear, and what they hide. He turned back to his monitors, flipping the switch. The screens roared to life, casting that cold blue light across his face once more. The master board of the Panopticon displayed live feeds of UA High School's external cameras, data profiles of the incoming Class 1A students, and the encrypted channel to the League of Villains. The seeds are planted, Izuku said, a dark, breathless excitement finally creeping into his voice. Now, we just need to add a little blood, and watch the anarchy bloom. He grabbed a fresh, black notebook. He opened it to the first page. Target 1, Class 1A. The ultimate despair was going to school. The gates of UA High School were a monument to hubris. Standing 4 stories tall, constructed of reinforced steel and polished gold plating, they were designed to evoke a sense of awe. They were meant to be the pearly gates of modern society, separating the divine from the mundane. To the thousands of students pouring through them on the first day of the academic year, the gates represented validation. They meant you were special. To Izuku Midoriya, walking with his head bowed and his oversized uniform hanging loosely off his thin frame, they looked exactly like the gates of an abattoir. Look at them, he thought, his vibrant green eyes hidden behind a curtain of messy curls. Marching into the grinder with smiles on their faces, he adjusted the strap of his plain yellow backpack. Inside, tucked safely between his textbooks and a bento box, was Despair Analysis for the Future, Volume 1. Izuku shuffled through the courtyard, his posture radiating subservience. He kept his shoulders hunched, his steps short and hurried. When a taller student with a minor mutation quirk brushed past him, Izuku violently flinched, gasping, sorry. Excuse me. The student didn't even look back. Izuku's internal monologue, however, was running at 1,000 words a minute. Subject 84, Class 1C. Minor reptilian scaling. Elevated aggression, likely overcompensating for the defensive nature of his quirk. Irrelevant. He navigated the sprawling, labyrinthine corridors of the school. Yui was divided by a strict caste system, unspoken but universally understood. The hero course students, classes A and B, were the aristocrats. The support course, classes F, G, H, were the artisans. The business course, classes I, J, K, were the merchants, and then there was the general studies department. Classes C, D, and E, the untouchables. The leftovers. The ones who dreamed of greatness but lacked the genetic capital to buy it. Izuku slid into his seat in Class 1C. The room was standard. The teacher was unexceptional. The students around him reeked of disappointment and simmering envy. They spent the homeroom period whispering about Class 1A, staring out the windows, wishing they were on the other side of the campus where the real education was happening. Izuku sat perfectly still, doodling aimlessly in a normal notebook. He didn't care about the curriculum. Yui wasn't a school to him. It was a hunting ground. And Class 1A was his primary prey. By the time the lunch bell rang, Izuku's plan was already in motion. The Yui cafeteria, Lunch Rush's domain, was massive. It was a cacophony of overlapping voices, clattering trays, and the smells of high-end international cuisine. It was also the only place where the rigid caste system broke down. General Studies and Hero Course students sat in the same room, though they rarely mingled. Izuku stood in the rice line, his eyes scanning the cavernous hall like a predator mapping a watering hole. He spotted them quickly. They were hard to miss, radiating the obnoxious, unearned confidence of the genetically blessed. At a table near the center, sitting rigid and upright, was Tenya Ida. Beside him, eating with a ferocious but cheerful energy, was Ochako Uraraka. Izuku took a deep breath. He let his shoulders slump. He forced his breathing to become shallow, simulating mild anxiety. He widened his eyes, summoning the exact amount of moisture to look perpetually overwhelmed. Showtime. He paid for his cheap bowl of katsudon, and turned away from the counter. He walked toward their table, purposely crossing paths with a third-year student carrying a massive tray. With calculated precision, Izuku tripped over his own feet. "Wa!" Izuku yelped. He collided with the third year. Izuku managed to keep his katsudon upright, but he dropped his chopsticks, his notebook, and his juice box, sending them clattering across the floor right next to Ida and Uraraka's table. "Hey! Watch it, Gen Ed!" The third year barked before storming off. Izuku dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he scrambled to pick up his belongings. "I am so sorry. I'm so clumsy. I'm sorry. Are you all right?" A loud, booming voice demanded. Izuku looked up through his eyelashes. Tenya Ida was out of his seat, his arm chopping through the air with mechanical rigidity. That upperclassman was entirely out of line. A hero in training should display situational awareness. "Here, let me assist you." Ida stooped down, picking up Izuku's notebook. "Oh, thank you," Izuku stuttered, his face flushing a perfect, embarrassed red. You're in the hero course, right? Class 1A? I recognize you from the entrance exam. I'm just in general studies. A student of UA is a student of UA. Ida declared proudly, handing the notebook back. I am Tenya Ida. And this is Ochako Uraraka. Uraraka smiled brightly, her cheeks puffing out. Hi. Wow, you really took a tumble. Do you want to sit with us? There's plenty of room. Izuku widened his eyes in mock disbelief. Sit with you? But I don't even have a quirk. I'd just be in the way of you amazing heroes. The bait was cast. Izuku watched as the microscopic expressions on their faces shifted. Pity. The most predictable, exploitable emotion in the human repertoire. Pity was a narcotic for heroes. It made them feel superior while disguised as altruism. Nonsense, Ida said, his brow furrowing with righteous indignation. Quirk or no quirk, you are a fellow student. Sit. Yeah, come on. Uraraka agreed, patting the empty seat next to her. What's your name? Izuku sat down slowly, pulling his tray close to his chest like a shield. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Thank you, this is really kind of you. For the next 30 minutes, Izuku played the role of the ultimate sycophant. He was the quirkless fanboy, starry-eyed and desperately clinging to the coattails of his betters. He asked them about their quirks. He asked them about their classes. He let them talk about themselves, knowing that humans were biologically programmed to enjoy the sound of their own voices, especially when speaking to an inferior. And while he smiled and stuttered, his mind was dissecting them alive. So, Ida-kun, Izuku asked, his eyes practically sparkling. Your quirk, it's engine, right? You must be related to the turbo hero, Ingenium. He's amazing. Ida's posture immediately stiffened, but a look of profound, almost religious reverence crossed his face. You know of my brother? Yes. He is the paragon of heroism. Our family has been in the hero business for generations. I strive every day to be a man worthy of the Ida name. It is a heavy burden, but one I bear with pride. Analysis complete, Izuku thought, though his external smile didn't waver. Tenya Ida? Engine quirk. Primary psychological drive, legacy. Familial expectation. His identity is not his own, it is entirely predicated on his brother, Tensei Ida. He is bound by rules because rules provide a framework for his immense fear of failure. If the rules are broken, or if the idol, his brother, falls, Ida's entire psychological foundation will collapse. He is rigid. And rigid things do not bend. They shatter. Izuku turned to Uraraka. And Uraraka-san? Your zero-gravity quirk is incredible. You must want to save so many people. Uraraka rubbed the back of her neck, her permanent blush deepening. She let out a nervous laugh. Ah, well, saving people is great and all. But, honestly? I'm in it for the money. Ida gasped, scandalized. The money? Uraraka-kun, heroism is a noble pursuit. To do it for financial gain is… No, I know. Uraraka waved her hands frantically. It sounds awful. But my family, they own a construction company, and we're really struggling. Like really struggling. If I can get my hero license, I can use my quirk to lift heavy materials and save them overhead costs. I just want my mom and dad to have an easy life. I want to buy them a trip to Hawaii. She looked down at her plain white rice, a shadow of guilt crossing her bright features. Analysis complete, Izuku noted mentally. Achiko Uraraka. Zero-gravity quirk. Primary psychological drive, guilt-fueled altruism masquerading as greed. She feels entirely responsible for her parents' poverty. Her cheerful demeanor is a coping mechanism for severe financial anxiety. She views herself as an investment. If she fails, she isn't just ruining her own life, she is dooming her parents. The fear of poverty and the guilt of being a burden are her fault lines. Show her that her efforts are worthless, or that she is actively hurting those she loves, and her spirit will implode. I think that's a beautiful reason, Uraraka-san, Izuku said aloud, offering a soft, pathetic smile. You're fighting for your family. That's what a real hero does. Uraraka beamed at him. Wow, Midoriya-kun. You're really nice. I'm glad we bumped into you. Yeah, Izuku whispered, taking a slow sip from his juice box. Me too. His eyes drifted across the cafeteria. He found the table where the louder students of 1A sat. A boy with red spiky hair, Kirishima, a boy with a lightning bolt in his hair, Kaminari, and a girl with pink skin, Ashido. And sitting at the end of the table, isolated by his own toxic aura, was Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku's eyes locked onto his childhood abuser. Bakugo looked terrible. The confident, explosive posture was gone. He was hunched over his food, eating with his left hand. His right arm, the one that had been hyperextended by the sludge villain, was wrapped in thick, restrictive medical bracing from the wrist to the elbow. The doctors had saved the limb, but the fine motor control and the sweat glands had been irreparably damaged. He could still create explosions, but they were a fraction of their former power, and using them caused him agonizing nerve pain. Worse than the physical damage was the psychological ruin. Bakugo's vocal cords had been scarred by the toxic sludge. He couldn't scream anymore. His trademark, ear-splitting yells were reduced to raspy, painful snarls. The prideful lion had been declawed and muted. As Izuku watched, Kaminari accidentally bumped into Bakugo's bad arm. Bakugo flinched, his red eyes blazing with feral panic for a fraction of a second before morphing into rage. He slammed his left hand onto the table. Watch it, spark plug, Bakugo rasped, his voice sounding like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together. The other students exchanged uncomfortable glances but quickly apologized. They pitied him. The great Katsuki Bakugo, reduced to an object of pity. Izuku took another sip of his juice box to hide the psychotic, razor-sharp smile stretching across his face. Oh, Kaken, Izuku thought, a dark thrill sending a shiver down his spine. You are already a ghost. You're holding on to your pride with bloody fingernails. You realize that you are broken goods, yet you still force yourself into the hero course because you don't know how to exist without superiority. I won't even have to break you. I just have to hand you the hammer and watch you smash yourself to pieces. Suddenly Izuku felt a chill. He moved his eyes slightly to the right. Sitting alone at a table near the window, eating a bowl of cold soba, was Shoto Todoroki. Todoroki wasn't looking at his food. His mismatched eyes, one cold gray, one burning turquoise, were locked dead onto Izuku. There was no emotion in Todoroki's stare. It was an analytical, dead-eyed gaze like a coroner examining a corpse. Izuku didn't flinch. He let his Deku mask slip for exactly 1/10 of a second. He met Todoroki's gaze. Izuku's green eyes went completely dead, void of all light, radiating an aura of pure, unadulterated apathy. Todoroki's eyes widened slightly, the spoon in his hand pausing halfway to his mouth. Then, Izuku instantly reverted. He blinked, blushed, and nervously looked away, returning to his conversation with Ida and Uraraka. Shoto Todoroki, Izuku categorized the data. Half cold, half hot. The masterpiece of Endeavor's eugenics program. He is highly perceptive. He noticed that I am acting, but he won't say anything, because he doesn't care. He is completely isolated by his own trauma. He hates his fire. He hates his father. He is a powder keg of repressed hatred, wrapped in a thin layer of ice. All he needs is a spark. The lunch bell rang, signaling the end of the period. Izuku stood up, bowing repeatedly to Ida and Uraraka. Thank you again. I hope you have a great afternoon in hero training. You as well, Midoriya-kun. Ida chopped the air. Keep your chin up. Izuku walked away. As he navigated the crowds back to the General Studies wing, his mind was already moving to the next phase of his operation. Profiling was only step one. Now, he needed to provide the motive. That night, in the dark sanctum of his bedroom, Izuku initiated phase 2. The blue light of the panopticon reflected in his eyes. On the primary monitor, the sleek, black and green face of Mono Rabbit bounced around the screen like a screensaver. Puh! Welcome back, Mastermind. The AI chirped through the speakers. Did we make some new friends today? We made acquaintances, Mono Rabbit, Izuku replied flatly, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Now we are going to make them bleed. Pull up the deep dive files on the Uraraka Construction Company and the Ida family. Okie dokie. Accessing financial records, private medical files, and municipal tax documents. Izuku had spent the last 2 months not just hacking hero databases, but civilian ones as well. To break someone, you had to attack what they anchored themselves to outside of their own ego. Izuku opened a highly advanced video editing software. It wasn't standard consumer grade. It was a proprietary program he had stolen from a movie studio's server, capable of flawless deepfakes and audio synthesis. Let's start with Uraraka, Izuku murmured. He pulled up the financial records of her parents' company. They were abysmal. They were operating at a massive loss, drowning in debt to predatory loan sharks in the underground just to keep their equipment running and pay for Ochiko's expensive living expenses. Izuku didn't just want to show her the debt. He wanted to make it visceral. He found a recent photograph of Uraraka's father from his social media. Using the deepfake software, Izuku manipulated the image. He animated the face, applying a filter of exhaustion, deepening the bags under his eyes, and digitally adding bruises to his cheekbones, the kind of bruises one might receive from a loan shark's enforcer. Then, using audio samples taken from voicemails he had skimmed from Uraraka's phone during lunch, he had bumped her bag and cloned her SIM card via a proximity scanner in his pocket. He synthesized her father's voice. On the screen, the deepfake of Uraraka's father looked into the camera, his eyes filled with despair. Ochiko, sweetie, the synthesized voice cracked with exhaustion. I'm so sorry. The men came again today. We can't make the payments. The interest on the loans we took out for your hero gear. It's too much. They said if we don't pay by the end of the month, they're going to take the house. They said they might come after you. Please, Ochiko, why did it have to cost so much? Why couldn't you just be normal? Izuku played it back. The audio was flawless. The slight tremor in the voice, the subtle background noise of a ticking clock. It was utterly devastating. It attacked her guilt, her fear of poverty, and inverted her desire to help her parents into the very cause of their suffering. Save file, motive_uraraka.mp4, Izuku commanded. File saved. Ooh, That's deliciously evil. She's gonna cry her little gravity-defying eyes out. Mono Rabbit cheered. Next, Izuku said, devoid of emotion. Ida. Tenya Ida was anchored by legacy. His idol was his older brother, Tensei Ida. Izuku couldn't deepfake Tensei doing something villainous. Ida's rigid mind would immediately reject it as a fake. He needed the truth. But truth, presented in the right context, could be far more damaging than a lie. Izuku hacked into the Hero Public Safety Commission's disciplinary archives. Heroes were heavily protected by PR firms, meaning their failures were almost always buried. Izuku dug until he found it. 3 years ago, during a massive villain attack in Hosa City, Tensei Ida had been first on the scene. The official report stated he valiantly evacuated 30 civilians. The classified HPSC report, however, told a different story. Tensei had rushed in too fast, ignoring protocol. His reckless speed had caused a structural collapse in a burning building. While he saved 30 people, his actions directly resulted in the deaths of 2 civilian paramedics who were trapped under the rubble his sonic boom created. The HPSC had paid the families millions in hush money to keep the Ingenium name spotless. Izuku compiled the raw, unedited bodycam footage from the police officers on the scene. It showed the paramedics screaming under the rubble. It showed Tensei Ida, panicking, fleeing the immediate area to save face while the building burned. Izuku added a simple line of text at the end of the video. This is your legacy, Tenya. A fraud built on dead bodies. How fast will you run when it's your turn? Save file, motive_ida.mp4. Izuku spent the next 6 hours crafting customized videos for the most prominent members of Class 1A. For Momo Yayorozu, he compiled a psychological breakdown of her immense wealth, proving mathematically that if she liquidated her family's assets, she could end world hunger, implying her choice to play hero was an act of supreme, narcissistic selfishness. For Eijiro Kirishima, he found middle school security footage of him cowering in fear while his friends were bullied, juxtaposed with his current manly persona, exposing him as a coward playing dress-up. For Shoto Todoroki, Izuku didn't need to fake anything. He simply hacked into the Todoroki household's private servers and downloaded a hidden audio recording of Rei Todoroki, Shoto's mother, weeping hysterically, in her hospital room, screaming that she could still see Endeavor's eyes every time she looked at her son. By 4 a.m., Izuku was finished. He transferred the files onto 20 sleek, black electronic tablets he had procured from the Detonarat shipment. They were untraceable, built without serial numbers. He packed the tablets into his bag. It was time to deliver the Trojan horse. UA High School was supposed to be a fortress. Its security system was state-of-the-art, designed by Principal Nizu himself. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, and biometric locks guarded every entrance. But a fortress is only as strong as its code. And code was Izuku Midoriya's native language. At 5 a.m., before the sun had even crested the horizon, Izuku stood in the shadows of the woods surrounding the UA campus. He pulled out a modified smartphone, hardwired with a decryption dongle. He didn't break the firewall. Breaking a firewall trips an alarm. Instead, Izuku simply politely asked the system to look the other way. He fed the UA mainframe a localized loop, tricking the cameras in the 1A hallway into broadcasting footage from exactly 24 hours prior. He disabled the thermal sensors by adjusting the ambient temperature baseline in the code, rendering his body heat invisible to the system. He walked through a side entrance used for janitorial staff, the electronic lock glowing green and clicking open before he even touched it. The hallways of UA were eerie in the dark. The grand, sprawling architecture felt hollow. Izuku moved with silent, practiced steps, his dark clothing blending into the shadows. He didn't breathe heavily. His heart rate remained perfectly steady at 60 beats per minute. He reached the 1A classroom. The student lockers were lined up in the hallway, secured with electronic keypads. Izuku approached locker number 1, Yuga Oyama. He plugged his dongle into the port at the bottom of the keypad. 3 seconds later, the locker clicked open. Izuku slipped a black tablet inside, nestled perfectly on top of Aoyama's hero costume case. He shut the locker. Locker 2, Mina Ishido. Click. Slip. Shut. Locker 4, Tenya Ida. Click. Slip. Shut. Locker 5, Achiko Uraraka. Click. Slip. Shut. Locker 15. Shoto Todoroki. Click. Slip. Shut. Locker 17. Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku paused at Bakugo's locker. He stared at the nameplate. For a moment, the ghost of the boy who used to cry when Bakugo pushed him into the dirt surfaced. But Izuku ruthlessly crushed it down. Izuku hadn't made a video for Bakugo. Bakugo didn't need a video. He was already living his worst nightmare. Instead, Izuku opened Bakugo's locker and placed a small, simple mirror inside. On the glass, written in red marker, was a single sentence. "Look at what you've become." He shut the locker. By 5:15 a.m., the deed was done. 20 lockers. 20 seeds of despair. Izuku retraced his steps, exiting the building and restoring the security systems behind him, leaving absolutely zero digital or physical footprint. He walked to a nearby convenience store, bought a box of strawberry juice pouches, and waited for the school day to begin. At 8 a.m., the students of Class 1A began to arrive. Shota Aizawa, the homeroom teacher known as Eraserhead, was currently zipped up in his yellow sleeping bag behind his podium, supposedly asleep. In reality, he was observing his class through a tiny slit in the fabric. Aizawa was a creature of logic and observation. He knew the baseline behavior of every student in his room within the first 5 minutes of meeting them. The baseline for Class 1A was loud, overly optimistic, and excessively energetic. But as the clock ticked toward 8:15 a.m., Aizawa felt a distinct, undeniable shift in the atmosphere of the room. It was like a sudden drop in barometric pressure before a violent storm. The chatter was dying down. Aizawa unzipped his sleeping bag and stood up, his dark eyes sweeping over the room. Something was wrong. Tenya Ida was sitting rigidly at his desk. He wasn't lecturing anyone about their posture. In fact, he was staring blankly at the blackboard, his face entirely drained of color. His hands were gripping the edges of his desk so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked like a man who had just watched his religion burn to the ground. Achiko Uraraka was at her desk, her head bowed. She was shaking. Aizawa could see the subtle tremble in her shoulders. Her vibrant, cheerful aura had been completely extinguished. She looked physically ill, her hands clamped over her mouth as if trying to hold back a sob. Momo Yayorozu was staring at her hands, her brow furrowed in deep, existential distress. Kirishima was avoiding eye contact with everyone, his usual manly bravado replaced by a nervous, defensive posture. Even Todoroki looked different. The usual stoic indifference was gone. The air around him was literally freezing, a layer of frost creeping over his desk as his quirk reacted to intense, repressed emotional turmoil. And Bakugo. Bakugo was staring at his desk, his red eyes wide and bloodshot, his breathing ragged and shallow, like a cornered, dying animal. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. What the hell happened between the lockers and the classroom? He walked down the aisle. Ida, Aizawa said, his voice flat but commanding. Is there a problem? Ida flinched violently, as if he had been struck. He looked up at Aizawa, his eyes wide and panicked. And no, sensei. Everything is perfectly fine. I am ready to learn. The lie was so blatant, so out of character for the painfully honest boy, that Aizawa almost activated his quirk on instinct. Uraraka, Aizawa turned to her. You look pale. Go to recovery, girl. No! Uraraka squeaked, her voice cracking. She stood up quickly, wiping her eyes. I'm fine. Really? I didn't sleep well. I'm ready for hero training. Aizawa looked at the rest of the class. It wasn't just Ida and Uraraka. The entire room was suffocating under a thick blanket of paranoia. They were looking at each other with suspicion, fear, and deep-seated insecurity. The cohesive, energetic unit he had seen yesterday was completely shattered. They were isolated islands of distress. Everyone, sit down, Aizawa commanded, his tone hardening. If something is going on, you tell me now. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. None of them spoke. The tablets had explicitly stated at the end of the videos, if you tell a teacher, this information goes public. They were trapped by their own secrets. Trapped by their own flaws. Aizawa scowled. He couldn't force them to speak. But he knew, with the instincts of a seasoned underground pro, that an external variable had been introduced to his class. Someone had gotten to them. Outside the classroom, in the brightly lit hallway of the UA first year wing, Izuku Midoriya leaned against the wall. He held a strawberry juice pouch in his hand, the small plastic straw between his teeth. He could hear the silence radiating from Class 1A through the heavy wooden door. He could feel the tension bleeding through the walls. It tasted sweeter than the juice. They realized it now, Izuku thought, a wide, euphoric smile spreading across his face, hidden from the world. They realize that their quirks can't protect them from the truth. They realize they are just children playing dress-up in a world that doesn't care about them. Izuku took a long, slow sip of his juice. The Trojan horse was inside the walls. The seeds of paranoia were planted. All it would take now was a little bit of pressure, and the illustrious Class 1A would tear themselves apart before the villains even had to lift a finger. The bell rang, echoing through the halls. Izuku tossed his empty juice pouch into a nearby trash can. He turned and began the long walk back to the General Studies wing, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, whistling a cheerful, entirely off-key tune. The ultimate despair was having a wonderful first week of school.